This video is for anybody in Toronto or Ontario that is sick and tired of the real estate prices. Maybe you live here and you are renting, and maybe you're under rent control and you'd love to get into the market, but the prices just don't make sense. Even with the dip in the market that we saw in 2022 from the peak when all the rates started going up, the average sale price for a property in the Greater Toronto Area is still $1.2 million. Now, you don't have to buy the average property. There's condos for $500,000, $600,000, but people are frustrated and they're looking for alternatives. And one of the alternatives is, well, you can just move, right? You can move to another market, but areas outside the GTA are very expensive as well. And something that's been interesting that maybe some of you have noticed is that even on the TTC in Toronto, there was ads for a long time saying move to Alberta. Like the province of Alberta was running ads in Ontario, which I thought was interesting. And we've been hearing a lot about the Calgary real estate market really kind of heating up over the last little while and kind of doing the opposite of what Ontario was doing and Toronto was doing. But a market that I haven't really talked about and truthfully don't know a lot about is Edmonton. And I've got my own kind of thoughts of what I think Edmonton is, but the truth is I've spent 2 hours in Edmonton once at the airport at a Boston Pizza. That's all I know about Edmonton. So I'm actually really excited because for the first time, I'm going to introduce somebody new on this channel. Calvin Hexter, I'm going to bring him in. He's an Edmonton real estate agent. He runs a great team out there, and specifically they focus on the investment side of real estate. And I want to show the viewers of this channel what options you have if you want to invest your money in Canadian real estate. I'm not even saying you got to move there, but what options and opportunities you have available to you. So I'm going to bring Calvin in. Calvin, welcome to the channel. I appreciate you being here.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And you know what, Tom? Just to make it clear, the Boston Pizza experience. Boston Pizza is great and all, but I'm hoping to take your knowledge about Edmonton from a 1, maybe a 0.5, and bring it up to at least a 3 in a very short period of time. Do you think we can do it?
Let's do it. So the average sale price in Edmonton as of right now, recording this, is like $375,000. In Toronto, it's $1.2 million. So that's a massive difference. During what we just experienced through all of Canada and the world going through the pandemic, did Edmonton see the price growth as well? And did you guys flip to a seller's market pretty quickly?
We did, yeah. So traditionally, Edmonton is known as a buyer's market. And for those of you that are not familiar with what that means, the buyers simply have an advantage when it comes to purchasing properties versus the sellers, which is more common in the bigger markets like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa. We did see a large increase. So normally Edmonton is very consistent. We're known, a lot of our GDP is oil and gas, government and manufacturing plants. And we did see an increase. We hit a record. I think most markets across Canada hit a record last year. We did as well. We flipped to a seller's market, and a lot of Edmontonians didn't know what to do, especially in the buying side, because they're not familiar with it. When you're so used to a buyer's market and then it flips to a seller's market, things change. Competition's way more prevalent, where a lot of the big city guys are used to the seller's market, and if ever flips to a buyer's market, sellers are going to be like, what the hell do we do? So it's very exciting times for sure.
So someone's watching this right now. They're sitting somewhere in Canada. It doesn't have to be Ontario, but whatever market that they're in, they're like, you know what? I'd love to get into the market, or maybe I already own real estate, but I want to invest more, but I can't afford where the current prices are. Now, when we think about investment, there's a few things that we think about. We think about cash flow or capital appreciation. And if you're buying in Toronto, you're basically buying on speculation. You're buying based on you believe the capital appreciation is going to go up over a period of time, because the days of cash flow with 20% down were gone like almost a decade ago. What's it like in Edmonton? Can I buy something in Edmonton with 20% down or less and it's going to cash flow? Like, what does that look like?
Absolutely. And great question. We get a lot of out of province investors looking for opportunities in our market for many different ways. Now, I'll tell you right now, if you're listening to this and your main goal is appreciation, I'm talking natural appreciation, not forced appreciation where you put money into a property to increase its value, Edmonton's not the place for you. But if you are looking for cash flow, this is the place for you. Cash flow is excellent. And for those of you that don't know what cash flow is, it's essentially the money that's left over after paying all expenses that's left in your pocket to save up for a trip to Vegas, pay down additional mortgage in your space in Ontario, save up for your kids, college fund or your retirement. So cash flow is definitely the main buzzword revolved around Edmonton. And we noticed that a lot of the out of province investors like the consistency. I find that you almost need like a bit of a rock, because you're right. I mean, I follow the GTA market quite a bit as well. And there's some big fluctuations. I mean, you could buy a house in 1 month and, look at last year, you could have bought probably in April. And then by the end of summer, that property could have been worth maybe $100,000 less, could have been, right? So there's some major fluctuations that you could experience. And so a lot of out-of-town investors like the idea of offering a little bit more consistency in the market, so it can just be a little bit more reliable. It really depends on what your end goals are for real estate, but there's definitely a huge opportunity if your goals are to, get into cash flow, get the benefits of the mortgage pay down. We have a lot of investors that are purchasing here. They're buying assets, and these are almost like little Easter eggs for their kids. So we'll work with a family. For example, we just worked with a family that's 24 years old. They're like, Calvin, I can't buy here. Like, we're not going to be able to buy here for like another 15 years. Can you show us like an a la carte menu of all the different options of what you can purchase here? And the a la carte menu would be property types, whether it's condo apartments, townhouses, half duplexes, single family, or larger. And we'd find an asset that would essentially meet their budget. And there are, I know your question is two parts, we get in for 20%. Can you also get in for less? Yes. And I think we're going to get to that answer as well. So if you're listening to this and we're talking about price points, and that with an investment property, you have to put down 20%. There are options if you don't have that 20%. So don't stop listening now. If you're like, you know what, 375, let me do the math. Okay, I need to put down $80,000 after everything. Don't stop listening. There's actually great options for you that we use on a regular basis that are very common in buyers markets. And that's what we're excited to tell you about today as well.
Exactly. So I actually wanted to leave that to the end, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I know some people off the beginning are like, Tom, what are you talking about? You can't buy an investment property unless you put down 20%. We will get to that. Now, in markets like Toronto and Vancouver, you are kind of paying a premium because our vacancy rates are so low. It's like it's almost a guarantee that you'll be able to find a tenant and rent out the property. Cash flow is great unless you can't find a tenant for 4 months, and then that cash flow you had disappears and it's negative cash flow. So what's the current state of actually being able to find tenants and the vacancy rate in the Edmonton market?
Yeah, so I think average vacancy right now in Edmonton is about 4.5% to 5% based on CMHC's last census. That's the average. Now, we know that every city is going to have A, B, C, and D areas. And this is in reference of desirability, A being the most desirable, D being the least desirable. Now, there's benefits to purchasing within each. I don't want to go through too much detail, but if you've heard of that before, typically the best cash flows in the D areas. But if you want to make sure that your asset is always rented, has the largest tenant profile selection, you're probably looking at a C, B, or A area. So there's areas that you can invest in. And I mean, just think about the city you're living in right now. You're going to have certain areas that are a little bit less desirable and certain areas that are a lot more desirable. And even if your vacancy rate's really low, you're probably going to get more phone calls depending on where you're living. Are you close to a university? Are you close to desirable infrastructure that's going to be able to help support the demand of tenant? Is there lots of jobs nearby? These are all things that you obviously want to look into when purchasing a property. So when you're buying in a city that you're not familiar with, and again, my goal is to take you from, a 0.5, Tom, to like at least a 3 after today, okay? Get in an area that has that demand. There's lots of areas in Edmonton that would be, 2%, 3%. And if you're buying a property that makes sense, you'll always be tenanted. I mean, let's talk about a property that makes sense. Let's just use single family detached, because I feel like it's probably the easiest discussion point. I mean, one of the most common investments that you can purchase here would be like a legally suited single family detached. So you have a main floor suite, and then you also have a basement suite. You have the ability to rent out both the main floor and the basement. And if the home has a detached garage not being attached to the home, you can actually rent that out for a third source of income. Typically, the more leases you have, the higher opportunity for gross rent, which also is going to increase your profit overall. So let's talk about what you could get. So if we were to get you set up, so we're going to talk about getting Tom set up for a single family detached. Okay. So we're going to get you all ready to go, and we're going to talk about numbers, and we're going to be real. We're going to be transparent. And I want you to, any questions you have, let's go through it. So In an ideal world, Tom, if your main goal was, say, cash flow, then your next goal was, having low vacancy, and you also want to have a good tenant profile, and maybe purchase in an area that has, upcoming infrastructure to be able to help support appreciation, would probably get you in like an area like our West End, near the famous West Edmonton Mall, right? Have you heard of West Edmonton Mall before?
You guys have is it like a skating rink or a roller coaster or something?
They have everything. Everything, okay. Like literally, you want to swim with the dolphins, you can swim with the dolphins. They literally have everything. A water park, they have everything. Okay. So if you get a chance, next time you come to Edmonton, please come to West Edmonton Mall. We'll go mini golfing. How about that? Let's do that next time you come here. Okay.
Sounds good.
So, you buy in the West End, you have a lot of infrastructure that's there. You purchase, say, a legally suited property. I'd get you into something that has 3 bedrooms up, because anything with more bedrooms, as long as the layout's still functional, we're probably commanding anywhere from 1,600 to 1,750 in rent. If you're including utilities, you're probably closer to the 1,750, 1,800 just for the main floor. 3 bedrooms is always better than 2, because you're going to tailor towards a larger demographic. Okay. Now we look at a basement suite. I recommend 2 bedrooms versus 1 bedroom. If you have a 2-bedroom basement suite, which is very common, we could rent that out for about $1,250 inclusive of utilities. Okay. So we're hitting right around, right below 3,000 in gross rent. Now you're thinking, okay, well, what are our expenses? Well, I mean, right now with mortgage rates, yes, they're up higher. Your cash flow is not going to be as good. I'll be completely honest. Your cash flow today is not as good as it was. For those that were shopping in COVID, do you guys remember when interest rates were like 1%? I had a client that said they got less than 1% on, the bank was going to let them borrow at less than 1%. I'm like, this is crazy. This is the lowest it's ever been. So it's never probably going to get back there. And cash flow was a lot better then, but it's still very good. So if you were to get into a property like that has, the desirable 3 bedrooms on the main floor, 2 bedrooms in the basement, it has a double garage, and it's not on a busy road, and it's in like a family community, you're not going to have any problems tenanting that property at all. And you can contact any property manager just to secure that fact. Cash flow on something like that, you're looking at about $200. You're looking at about $200 to $300 right now. And when the interest rates go back down, and I'm optimistic that they will be going back down for 2024, I'm hoping they will at least, that cash flow we typically see is around $500 to $600 on an asset that's worth about $375 to $425. And that is putting 20% down. And like we said, halfway through this, that we are going to talk about how you can pay a little bit less down. So cash on cash return on that, you're right around 8%. Okay. And that's just on the money you're getting back through cash flow. We're not talking about mortgage pay down as well, because let's say Tom gets in this property right now. So Tom just removed conditions today, and the property's turnkey, meaning that's ready to go. And we have tenants lined up for possession. If Tom starts paying down the property today and his mortgage is, say, for 30 years or 25 years, whatever he decides to do, that property will be fully paid off and appreciating at probably 1% to 2% a year. That asset in 25 to 30 years could be worth, $600,000 paid off. That's a huge addition to your, what would you do with $600,000 in 25, 30 years?
Right now, I might throw it in a GIC because they're like 4.5%. But yeah, long term, yeah, that helps retirement. That's for sure.
That's a huge bump in retirement. We know that there's inflation, so $600,000 today is not going to be $100,000, but that's still pretty good. Is that going to pay for a college fund? Is that going to help with your retirement? Is that going to help with, your health? It's going to help so much. And if you repeat that process a couple times over, that's life-changing. And not only that if Tom was to get in something today, we know that the banks will typically lend you on a HELOC about 80% of the home's worth, right? In most cases. So what if Tom invested today and he's like, Calvin, I need the money out faster. I want to buy another property. And I simply just want to use the value of this property. What I would do is, when the market hits a certain level or he has so much equity pay down, we'd go ahead and get an appraisal done on the property. And Tom can actually pull out a large chunk of change in, say, 5 or 10 years. And he can use that as additional money to either repurchase new homes or be able to use that for lifestyle needs.
So, okay, so this property, this magical property we're talking about right now, I can buy. It has 3 bedrooms upstairs. Maybe it's a 1-bedroom downstairs. You convert it to a 2-bedroom or something like that, or you find a 2-bedroom downstairs. You rent out the top, you rent out the bottom. I can get $3,000 in rent a month, give or take, total, and this property is costing me under $400,000, like about $400,000. That exists right now.
That's right. Yeah, it
Wow.
exists right now, and we can actually go for a little bit cheaper. Now, just know that depending on the area you purchase, if you buy that property in a D area, you can buy that
Right.
property for about 330,000. Okay, if you buy that property in a C area, you can buy that for about, we're going to say about 385 to 400 on average, maybe just slightly over 400. If you're buying in a B area, about 500,000, and if you're buying it in an A area, you're looking at about 600,000. So
Okay.
again, each area offers different benefits. And one of the questions I always ask in the beginning is I ask, put these four variables in order so I understand where you need to invest first. And then we can talk about what you can afford. So we can talk about the a la carte menu, which property type makes the most sense. We run the numbers beforehand, so there's no surprises. We do not want any surprises when it comes to purchasing. Surprises usually don't come in good packages. It's usually not good. It's usually negative. So we'd understand, is it cash flow, tenant profile, vacancy, appreciation, whatever your order is, there's no right or wrong when it comes to investing, as long as you're investing and you are investing towards what that end goal looks like. As long as you're doing that and it makes sense, that's perfectly fine. There is no right and wrong. Okay.
So most people that believe that investing in real estate is passive have never invested in real estate because it's the least passive thing ever. You very much have to be hands-on with a lot of it, right? The only people that make that statement is because they've never done it before. Now, obviously, if you're buying in a market that you're not currently living in, you're going to want some type of property management. So just 10%, 15%, what is property management taking off the top from the rent?
Yeah, so on residential right now, the average is between 8 and 10%. If you're getting into commercial, so 5 units or above, we typically see about 4% for property management. One thing I got to say is that it's really important, and a lot of people are thinking in their head, I like the idea of investing in a different city, but I'm not there to look at the property. If I need a handyman, if I need electrician, plumber, it's important to get set up with a team that already has a power team that you can just plug into. So, you don't technically ever need to see the asset. You have a digital code or a contractor lockbox there with keys in it, and your trades access it. So if your tenant's like, I have a leaky toilet, that's always just the famous one. That's not actually as common as everybody thinks. I have a leaky toilet. Your tenant takes a photo, sends it to you, you send it to the plumber, you give them the code to access. The plumber goes ahead and takes a photo and a video upon completion, sends the invoice, puts the keys back. That's it. You never need to touch it. So trades are also a lot easier to get a hold of here than a lot of the bigger cities as well. We're not running into a lot of the issues with trades finishing jobs or just the accessibility of trades as well. So there is definitely some additional benefits that way.
Is there any short-term rental regulations in Edmonton as of right now?
When it comes to individual condomized units or stratified units, yes.
Okay.
So that would be particular to the building and what the condo board bylaws have created. When it comes to anything that's not condominiumized or strata, there is no limitations for short-term Airbnb. It's actually quite popular in Edmonton.
That's what I was going to ask. So anyone that wants to take it to the next level, that wants to buy a property and not just do the 1-year lease and just do short-term, furnish it, obviously you're taking on more risk, but then the upside is you'll get more money, throughout that 12-month period versus the 1-year rental. Are any of your clients actively doing that and finding success with that?
Yes. It's important to have a plan when you go into it. I think a lot of people in this market, what we're seeing is that a lot of people are spoiled with, they're used to getting, on that property that we're talking about purchasing, they're used to making about $600 to $800 in cash flow a month. Again, that's money left over at the end. That's after vacancy, that's after maintenance, that's after all expenses. So a lot of them are, we don't realize how good we have it until we start to compare it to other cities and how much more challenging it is to achieve that cash flow. Now, those that have been here a long time that typically achieve those higher numbers, when we start to make $200 to $300 on a property, it sounds crazy, but they're like, what the hell? I'm barely making anything, or I'm almost hitting even. So a lot of them have gone through the conversion of a short-term rental to be able to boost that gross rent income to be able to subsidize their lifestyle. Because I'm assuming the couple $100 per property less might be wearing on their, big multi-million-dollar property or their regular trips to Mexico, whatever it is. So it's definitely a popular option. You bet.
We hear a lot of horror stories in Ontario. Being a landlord is not always, what it's made up to be. If someone refuses to pay rent and they know how the system works, it's like 6 months of fighting them. Then you get a court case, then you win. But all this, and then at the end of it, you're like, screw this. I never want to be a landlord again. The Ontario rules are very much favoring the tenant. What is it like in Edmonton?
I'm glad you brought it up. I actually love to hear horror stories. I love to hear them. It's just they're so interesting. I mean, can a lot of them be prevented? Maybe. We do not have the same favorability to tenants in GTA, very high. Favorability to landlords, very low. It flip flops in Edmonton. So it's great that, I mean, and whenever we have it really bad, I always refer to a different market and it could be a lot worse. There's not any rental caps. So say that the real estate market goes through a massive climb like last year. And then we know that the rental market can usually follow, I mean, as fast as 6 months to 12 months after we start to see big jumps in property value. Now, if you're a landlord and your property value goes up and rents start to go up and you have a tenant in there, and I know that a lot of people listening to this can resonate with this. So property value went up. 12 months down the road now, you notice that rental prices are up quite a bit as well. But you have this long-term tenant you've had for 2 years and they're fantastic. And you know that there's a rental cap of what you can achieve. So you can either try and figure out a way to terminate that lease and get a new tenant in to make you a couple extra $100, or you maintain that tenant position because they've been a good, loyal tenant, always paying and maintaining the integrity of the property. There's no rental cap rates here. So meaning that, Tom, on that property that you're purchasing, the 3 bedrooms up, 2 bedrooms down, if the market skyrockets, and we know that you could get an extra $200 per unit, main floor and basement, you're able to do that as long as it's outside of 365 days of your original lease date.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So you're able to fluctuate faster with the market and not be limited. Okay. Now, in addition to that too, we talked about, evictions. So if you ever need a bailiff to get the tenant out because they just don't want to simply, I mean, I hear horror stories all the time. Sometimes on the news, they're absolutely horrific on how some of these tenants can literally cripple a person in the sense that they can't even pay their own mortgage because their tenants are not paying the basic essentials of their investment property. Terrible to hear. You can evict a tenant within like a month and a half here. Okay. I think even shorter as well. So things happen a lot faster. I'm hoping that we never catch up to the big city in being so favorable to the tenants. I mean, if you're a tenant and you're listening to this, we don't hate you tenants. We just want a good tenant. So if you're listening to this, we love great tenants. But the professional tenants that like to abuse the system, sure, that's where it gets tough. So,
I'd actually say there's the people that would probably be most interested in this are tenants right now in Toronto or somewhere in Ontario being like, I'm a tenant, but I'd love to own real estate, but maybe I can't afford to buy the real estate in my market. And I think that's super interesting. Now, the big thing in Toronto, on top of just the prices of the asset, is we have this sneaky little thing called land transfer tax, and the city brings in $1 billion with a B, $1 billion a year from this municipal land transfer tax. It was put in 2008 when the average home price was like $400,000. Now we're at $1.2 million. It's absurd, but it's never going anywhere because it's such a revenue generator for our city, and it happens at the end of the transaction. It's like no one talks about it, and you pay the lawyer. If I buy a house for $425,000 in a C or B neighborhood and I rent it out for $3,000, what are my closing costs?
Okay, so your closing costs as a buyer is going to be, let's go through the entire process. So you have your inspector, and if it's a single family detached, you're looking at about $600 with a sewer scope, which I recommend.
Okay.
After that, you would be paying the lawyer. The lawyer fees, we'll say $1,500. We're just going to round up. And moving costs. So if you're going to get a moving truck, if you want to get a cleaner in there afterwards. Now, Tom, you're like, Calvin, well, you forgot a couple things. I'm like, Tom, no, I didn't forget a couple things because we don't have land transfer tax and we don't have PST.
There's no land transfer tax.
So when it comes to the, no, save that money. Tom, save your money and buy a boat. I mean, you guys have such a beautiful, area to go. I always see the boat parties, by the way. I don't know why they always come on my Instagram, but they always do. They look fantastic. I mean, they look great. Use that money. Go buy a boat, invite me on that boat. Let's go talk more about real estate. And let's invite all of our friends. I think that's what we should do. That's exactly what we should do. So I think we should do a petition. Tom does not buy any more real estate in the GTA. He buys it here, saves all the money in land transfer tax, gets a nice yacht, and we go have fun every summer. I think that sounds like a great idea.
I am on board with that. Okay, the final thing I wanted to bring up was at the very beginning, I said, is it possible to buy an investment property with less than 20% down? And in a typical scenario in Canada with the mortgage and everything and CMHC, that answer is a hard no. You need 20% down if you're not moving into the property. We had talked before, and by the way, just so people know that are listening this far in, like, you didn't pay to be here. I'm not trying to promote Edmonton. I hope people stay in Toronto. Like let's be very clear, right? But But I thought this was interesting because you're like, oh no, we're creative with it, and you called it like seller financing agreements or for agreement for sale, which like in my 10 years of selling real estate in Toronto, sure, there's vendor takebacks and stuff like that, but it hasn't really been a thing in the last decade. How is this possible? Like, what does this look like if you don't have the full down payment, but you want to buy an investment?
So in a buyer's market, and being in a buyer's market, like we've seen in Edmonton for such a long time, we have to get creative with our purchasing. Just like, buyers in a big market need to get creative with their offers to be like, hey, it's me out of, 30 other competitors. You have to be very smart with how you write it up. So for us, when it comes to the buying side, we don't have that same level of competition consistently. So there's other challenges that we deal with. And one of the biggest challenges is that people want to purchase properties, but not necessarily put 20% down or get a mortgage. So seller financing is essentially where the seller takes the position of the bank versus the bank taking the position of the bank. Now, a lot of people that think that we already spent too much money on the banks and they make too much money, seller financing could be a great option for you. Seller financing, we always want to complete it when it's a win-win situation. Buyer wins, seller wins. We do not want to engage in it unless both parties win. To understand how seller financing works, the only difference between a conventional purchase and say something like an agreement for sale, let's use that as an example, is that upon the possession date, instead of it being called possession date where you take the keys, it's actually called the commencement date of the agreement for sale. So you still get the keys, you still get to do whatever you want with the property, except the seller maintains their name on the mortgage for that negotiated term. So let's use an example of Tom in that property, okay? So 3 beds up, 2 beds down, we talked about this already. So Tom's like, you know what, Calvin? I want to buy right now, but that yacht I talked about with you? I already bought it. I bought it last week and I only have about 15%, 10%. I'm like, you know what, Tom? You did a great thing, silly thing, but a great thing. You only have 10% down. Okay, so let's see what we can purchase. Sellers are allowing a lot less money down. That money will go towards paying realtor commission and money in the seller's pocket. The remaining balance that's owed to, at the completion date of the agreement for sale, because every seller financing deal has a term, just like a bank has a term. So say that we got, possession date or the commencement date of the agreement for sale September 1st. So Tom gets the keys. He can rent out the main floor, rent out the basement. He puts down 10% of his money. Okay. His name goes on title. The seller's name also maintains on title too. So the seller can't sell the property. Well, I mean, the seller can't sell the property because you're on title, because you have invested interest, whether you're taking as a caveat position or you're taking a power of attorney. We've seen both. And you have the ability to sell the property if you like at any time throughout that term as well, as long as the seller gets paid. So there's a huge advantage to that. Now, when Tom gets possession of this property, he can rent it out right away, and he's the one that gets the cash flow. What if the seller had 4% interest rate? What if the seller had 4% interest rate versus the 6 to 7% that we're seeing right now? I mean, for those math whizzes that are, listening in right now, go ahead and type it in send us a message, type it in the chat, however it works. Tell us how much more money we're generating because of it. I mean, you might end up capturing an extra $150 overall for that unit because that difference in interest rates, right? So not only do you have the ability to pay less down, you have the ability of taking the opportunity of a lower interest rate, especially if that seller locked it in. And then you don't have to worry about paying that seller the remaining balance outside that 10% that's already been paid until the completion date. So, I mean, say you got a 3-year term. You don't have to worry about doing anything. And say the market skyrockets in 2 years, you could sell the property, make a massive profit, and you've only ever had to put 10% down, right? I mean, that's huge. And you also get the mortgage
and during that entire time, the initial seller's name is still on title? There's never a moment where is there ever a moment where it fully transfers?
It does fully transfer upon the completion date of the agreement for sale. So when if Tom, you called me up in 2 years from now and you're like, Calvin, you just sent me a market report. Things are looking good. What I want to do is instead of buying the single family detached, I want to be able to move into a duplex with suites. As you guys know, it as semi-attached with suites in the basement, right? And when I say you guys, I just mean like a lot of the listeners are going to be from Toronto, Ontario, semi-attached is
it's actually it's the center of the universe is what I think you're referring to.
It sounds like I love going there. I try and make it there at least twice a year, just so everybody knows. So maybe you want to increase your asset to something larger that has a better cash on cash return, because at this point when you're investing, you're only able to afford a single family detached. But maybe you want to buy a 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 unit building, which you can still do agreement for sales on, as well as, more popular VTBs, vendor takebacks. You have the ability to sell and then get into something else and continue with your agreement for sale. So there's a lot of people that are taking this technique and making massive success because of it. I mean, let's just think about everything we just were told here. So you can put down 10%, you get all of the mortgage pay down throughout that entire term. So if you have a 5-year term, I mean, that's a decent amount of mortgage pay down, right? So that means less money that you actually have to pay at the end to the seller, right? You have to take that into consideration as well. You don't need a bank to finance you, and you have the ability of getting a much lower interest rate than what the current banks are allowing you to get. Now, who else is good for an agreement for sale? What if you just move to the GTA and you have a new job? Are the banks going to lend you money? Probably not. You're looking at a B lender, probably not. You're looking at a C lender because you're considered high risk, right? And what do C lenders or B lenders offer? Much higher interest rates. It doesn't make any sense. So if you're in a position like that, you move jobs, you move locations, you're at capacity because you already have so many properties that are under your name. You cannot continue to grow the way you want to. We have to get creative. And for the sellers, you're wondering, and I'm telling you a lot in how you're wondering, just because I get these questions a lot. You're wondering, well, why would the seller want to do this? Like, why doesn't the seller just want to take their money and go? Well, have you ever tried to sell a property when you're midterm and there's a massive penalty?
Yep.
10,000, 15, 16,
Yep.
$20,000 to break your mortgage. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money out of the seller's pocket. So does it make more sense that maybe the seller can save that money, not sell until technically the end of the term, puts them in a better position? Or what if they just need like 5 or 10 more thousand than what today's market's willing to allow them? Because simply maybe they bought at a higher rate as well, right? And so agreement for sale, sometimes sellers can make a little bit more on their property, but you're providing a solution for the buyer, you're providing a solution for the seller. That's the win-win that we talked about from the beginning. And it's such a popular tool that I wanted to bring up. And I think this is the first time we've actually talked about this entirely, right, Tom? Like,
Yeah.
we haven't really spent much more time, besides right now, actually going through it. So as you guys are learning this, Tom's learning this too, which is so cool, because I hear from Tom all the time, and he's teaching me stuff all the time, right? I'm going to these conferences, listening to the podcast. So these are some different tools that I'd like to share back with you guys. And again, it's all about the win-win.
I'm a slow learner, so this might take me a little while. Okay, so now I just want to kind of wrap this all up and put a bow on it, and I'm going to tell everyone watching right now where they can go to learn more about what you guys are doing. And obviously, 30 minutes in here, you can tell how educated Calvin is on this market. What I wanted to kind of say at the end here was like, okay, anyone listening saying this seems like a good idea, I'm interested. What I would just warn you of is that this is a long-term investment. So what you have to do is you have to write down on a piece of paper, okay, I'm potentially buying a property at this price. It will take this long for it to be fully paid off. Here's my initial cash flow. Here's my cash flow in potentially 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years. And then show in 25, 30 years when it's paid off, and be conservative, right? 1 to 2% appreciation a year in this market. And there could be more good times, but there also could be more bad times, right? And I think the volatility in the real estate market right now in Canada is also making it very, very clear who is a professional investor and who is an amateur investor. Who jumped in just because it was the cool thing to do versus who aligned themselves with people like Calvin or like, our team in our market that actually understand that if you're buying this for 2 years to sell it, like, do not buy it. Continue to rent and don't do that. Put your money in a GIC that makes way more sense. Now, if someone, I know you guys do like a weekly email where you show opportunities in your market. If someone were to want to connect with you guys or sign up for that, I'll put the link below so you guys can go. Be in the description, first link in the description. But what can they expect if they put their email into that?
Yeah, so we're not spammy by any means. I mean, we don't have enough time in our day to be spammy. So the way that it works is that we hand select investor deals on a regular basis, both on market, which is what you can find on realtor.ca, that's public to everybody, and then also off market. Off market deals are just not, if you've never heard of those before, they're just not publicly advertised. So you're learning about them because your realtor knows about them, your friend knows about whatever it is. So we hand select off and on market deals, everything from fix and flips, BRRRRs, so where you buy, renovate, rent, refinance, redo the process, which is one of my favorite tools for building momentum in investment real estate. Purchasing a turnkey property, so we also have turnkey options as well. And when we send out these deals, we don't just send out a fix and flip and say, hey, it's, this property's for $250,000, go have fun. We go through the after repair value. We'll break down the numbers with you. When it comes to a fix and flip, understanding holding costs, borrowing costs, renovation costs, closing costs, and then obviously making sure that you're generating a bit of a profit in there as well. We go through the numbers with you as well, and we send it out so you understand exactly what you need. So you don't have to be an expert investor, that's been doing this for decades to be able to understand these emails. We make them very simple and we break down the numbers for you. In addition to the turnkey properties where you literally just, purchase and then tenant upon possession, we also send out things like seller financing options, like we talked about today, as well as multifamily. Anything from 5 units. I think the highest we've ever sent out was like 70-unit building in the last year. So depending on what your appetite is, and that's really what it comes down to, is how big is your appetite? We should be able to feed it to a certain extent, but that's essentially what we end up emailing out on a regular basis. So some stuff you'll maybe see on the MLS and you won't know whether it's a good deal or not, or maybe you won't see it. We'll be able to determine that, and then also everything else that's off.
Kind of handpick the opportunity so that someone's not just confused looking at all these hundreds of options, not knowing what to do, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, man, I appreciate you being here. I think this was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I have a good idea that most people watching and listening to this learned a lot as well. If you have questions for Calvin, put them in the comments, because when this video goes live, I'll let you know, and to make sure that you're there to kind of answer people. And if there is interest, let us know in the comments. Like if you wanted to kind of take this live and we could do this again, but live on the channel, kind of like webinar style, and answer questions live, I think it would be very, very interesting. So thank you everybody for watching this. Thank you for listening. If you have not already, but you have watched 36 minutes of this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a big fat like. I hope everyone that lives in Ontario still likes Ontario, but I got to admit, there's maybe some decent investment opportunities that I didn't know anything about over in Edmonton. Thank you for watching. My name is Tom Storey, and remember, home is where your story begins. Thanks, Calvin.